Hi there. Very good day, evening, or wherever, whatever time it is you're listening to this. This is the Play Up podcast with myself, Scott McLachlan. We're doing another one of our My Pompey Life series, our second one. We were lucky enough to get Colin Farmery, who waxed lyrical about his entry into sporting Pompey when he was a young lad in the very early 1970s. And today I'm delighted to welcome Donald Vass, who's the current chairman of the Pompey Supporters Trust, and has been a Pompey fan for the last, 25 years, something like that, something approaching 25 years. So delighted to have him along to talk. So thank you for joining me, Donald. Nice to see you.
Thanks for having me on. I have to say, I really enjoyed Colin's episode. I always enjoy listening to Colin chat about Pompey. So very happy to be the next guest.
Well, we weren't joking when he could probably have done 4 or 5 hours, so I will get him back.
he could very happily have spoken for that long as well, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Well, we'll get on to the 80s with him next, and maybe one day catch up with current history. So, tell us about your very first memories then, and maybe your first match at Fratton Park, and how you. Because you're not from Pompey originally, you're from elsewhere. So how did you get involved with being a Pompey supporter?
Yeah, my route into the Pompey family is probably a little bit different to others. I guess a lot of people, it comes from family members, and particularly fathers, I think it's probably fair to say. My dad's a little bit unusual. I describe him as a football nomad. He's moved around a little bit. He's Scottish, and I think if you asked him, who do you support, he'd say Ayr United, who are his Scottish team up north of the border. But he moved to London for work when he was quite young, and he actually bought a Spurs season ticket when he lived down in London. And then the year that him and my mum had me, they moved down to Worthing, and then he got quite involved in the sort of non-league scene around there, and went to quite a few Worthing games. As he loves to tell me, my first football match was probably apparently sort of 3 or 4 days old. He took me to a Worthing game and changed my nappy there on the terrace, apparently. So I was indoctrinated in local football from a young age. But yeah, so he's obviously massively into football, but didn't have like a particularly strong affiliation with one club, or at least not one that a young boy in Worthing felt like he could connect to. I think with the greatest will in the world, it would have been quite difficult for me to start following Ayr United. I think south coast of England, following I think then they were maybe the third tier of Scottish football. So it wasn't the most appealing club to start supporting. So football was massive in our household, and we'd watch it on the telly, and I vividly remember sort of every Saturday morning, he and I would watch Soccer AM together, all the rest of it. I wouldn't say I sort of had a particularly strong affiliation to a particular club, which is kind of unusual, I guess, for a young kid. And I sort of went off to high school, and obviously all my mates there were Premier League fans, of the greatest in the world. They were sort of Man United and Liverpool at the time, a few Arsenal fans, a few Chelsea fans popped up when they started doing well, of course. And I think basically what kind of got me into supporting Pompey was I kind of looked around and I thought, I quite fancy a bit of this, like there's sort of banter flying around, people all sort of have a club support, and I thought, actually, this is a bit of a gap in my life here, and truth be told, basically, I sort of glanced around at match there and went, which team on here is nearest to me, and the rest is history. Yeah, it really is. It was through that I kind of selected Portsmouth, I guess. It probably counts as glory hunting, doesn't it?
If you come into more recent history, it could easily have been a Bournemouth or a Brighton fan, really, couldn't it? If Pompey weren't in the Premier League, as I say, did you get a lucky escape there, perhaps?
A lucky escape, I'd say, or maybe not. Maybe I'd be happier at the Amex these days, but. Obviously, once you sort of set your roots down, that's it, isn't it? Like you can't really undo it. So no. For better or worse, I sort of pestered my dad in, I think it's sort of 2003, 2004. Like, can we go to a game? Can we go to a Pompey game? And he got me tickets. So we are the first match I ever went to. I looked this up before going to the recording. It was a 2004 FA Cup game against Scunthorpe. So yeah, I suspect basically the reason we went to that one would have been, quite hard to get Premier League tickets, quite expensive. I presume those ones would have been a bit cheaper and a bit more easily accessible. So yeah, we my first ever game, 2004, Scunthorpe United in the FA Cup.
Cool. And so when you'd been to Fratton Park, was it an evening game? Because
no, it was a sort of Saturday afternoon from
it was a
memory.
Saturday afternoon. Okay, cool.
I would say
so. Go on.
My overriding memories of it, this sort of tells you about the consumerism of young children, to be honest. It was mainly around sort of like the bits and pieces I bought at the game. So I really vividly remember, like, my dad took me to McDonald's beforehand. That was great. And he bought me a Yorkie to take into the stadium, and I was delighted about that. And then, got to the ground and probably pestered him again to take me to the club shop. And I came out of a scarf around my neck and a toy Frogmore, as it was at the time. None of this sort of Nelson nonsense you get now. It was a proper Frogmore toy.
Frogmore the frog, yeah.
Yes, yeah. And so we'd have been sat in the south stand, and I'd been to quite a few football games by this point, but mainly sort of non-league ones around Worthing. We'd been to a couple of their United games, to be honest, actually, because they'd had a very successful season in 2002, and they reached, I think it was the Scottish League Cup final and maybe the Scottish FA Cup semi-final. And so we went to Hampden twice in a week. We went up to the Scottish National Stadium and went to see Ayr United there. So I'd been to games before, but it did feel different. It felt different, and I don't know whether that's just sort of hindsight and sort of rose-tinted glasses, but I really did feel this connection, and I felt like whether it was the sort of having been to the non-league games, obviously it's really sparse, and Hampden, where, to be fair, the Ayr United end was probably pretty sparse as well, but it had that sort of different sort of feel. Suddenly going to Pompey, I really do remember it, and I remember that atmosphere. It did hit you. Now, obviously, looking back, as with adult eyes, I can see it probably wouldn't have been a great atmosphere. It was a sort of early cup game. It was against lower league opposition. I doubt anyone else in the crowd there particularly remembers that game, but it was really memorable for me. And I think that Pompey sort of sunk its hooks into me that day, and ever since then I've been going. That was it.
Just looking at that team for that game, I mean, some names that people. One of my favourite players at the time, Alexis Smirtin. I think I had a bet with my mate throughout the whole of that season that he would score a goal, and he never did. He used to have lots and lots of shots, but never get them on target. But we had some top players playing in that game. Teddy Sheringham up front, Berger on the wing, Kevin Harper, football genius, Isle Berkovic, which, again, a player. I mean, there's so many players over the last 20, 30 years that people would have forgotten that we had. Petri Passanen, who was playing for us at left back, and I think Limvoy Primus would have been playing at right back in that game. That was the crux. That was our first season in the Premiership, obviously, it was a good time to see your first Pompey match, wasn't it? Really, I think with that team, seeing the likes of Teddy Sheringham play and Patrick Berger, I'm sure some more recent Pompey fans would have loved to have seen those in action.
I think it was a really special time, wasn't it? And I think this is probably why the atmosphere felt so amazing, even though it was just a pretty routine 2-1 win. Nothing special about the game itself. I think the people of Portsmouth would have been sort of swept along in that whole season. First year back in the Premier League and all that came with it. It was a really exciting time, and I really remember that. It was a great time to sort of get stuck into it, to get swept away in it all, and it was it felt right. It felt amazing being there.
Because that FA Cup run as well. Sorry, that FA Cup run. I mean, I don't know whether you'd see. You must have seen the subsequent games on the telly. So we had an FA Cup draw at Anfield, 1-1 with a Matty Taylor last 5 minutes and running the length of the pitch because he'd scored to the Pompey fans at the way end. And then, of course, the home game where I think it was Richard Hughes scored the winner against Liverpool in the 5th round. And I don't know if you remember, that game was famous for, I think it was Michael Owen and this is an this is a Barry Davis commentary, a legendary bit of commentary. I remember it so well that Michael Owen was through on goal, and Linvoy Primus came out of nowhere and did this amazing tackle. And I remember Barry Davis on the commentary going, "Oh, what a fantastic tackle by Primus!" No, the referee's given a penalty, and even the commentator at the time, when you wouldn't hear that these days, but the commentator at the time just exclaimed his disbelief that the referee had given a penalty. And then Owen ended up missing it anyway, and then we ended up winning the game and going on to, again, another famous game, which was the Arsenal FA Cup game, where we got roundly thrashed 5-1. Thierry Henry goes on to wear a Pompey shirt at the end of the match just because the Pompey fans got louder and louder and louder every time Arsenal scored. So
that was the famous can we play you every week, even though we were losing 5-1, but that was
absolutely, There was, it was a great crowd to be in, and that was on telly as well, because that was an FA Cup quarter final, wasn't it? So that.
I can't remember whether it's the home or away one of the Liverpool games, but I uploaded one of those to YouTube during COVID, because I sort of I'd recorded quite a few games off the telly. I think it was on VHS at the time this season. Getting really excited about it all, and when COVID hit right back in March 2020, I started sort of uploading some of the old ones I had to YouTube, and I think after about a week the club just sort of said, "Can we have all these, please?" And they uploaded them in the end. But certainly, I think that Liverpool game was one that I got to first. But yeah, I have to say I watched most of that season on TV rather than being there. I went to the odd game like the Scunthorpe one, but I really do remember, I sat down in the living room with my dad. We made a sort of a big event of sort of watching that Arsenal game in particular, and it was scintillating football, wasn't it? It was a really special one to see, even sort of from TV. You could tell how amazing that Fratton Park crowd was.
Yeah, it was a good season to get to nail your colours to the mast, because I'm just looking at the fixtures later on. Of course, there's the 1-0 against the Scummers with the Yakubu tap in from the Steve Stone cross. So yeah, it's a really, really good season out of all the seasons the last 30, 40 years to become a Pompey fan, really. So how old were you then when you that first season?
I think I'd have been 12.
Yeah. So I think you've mentioned that when you went to university, that's when you started going regularly.
Yeah, so I sort of followed Pompey throughout my sort of teenage years and sort of went to the odd game, maybe sort of 2 or 3 games a season, maybe. And I always sort of followed them. But then when it came time to choosing my university, maybe not a complete coincidence, I ended up at Portsmouth University, and thought, right, I'll get stuck in a bit more here. And
was that the best one for your course?
Yeah. I did journalism actually, and met a few sort of interesting Pompey faces through doing that. I know Mary Williams is still a big Pompey fan. She was my journalism lecturer. So when I went to university, suddenly I had a bit of money for the first time. Actually, I could afford a season ticket, and having only been able to afford to go to maybe a sort of game or 2 each year, suddenly I had a bit of cash in my pocket, and of course student tickets were a little bit cheaper, so I made full use of that and bought my first season ticket in 2009, 2010. Now, of course, the team had not long won the FA Cup. We'd just been in Europe, and it was all very exciting. And I thought, great, this is I had such great success my first season as a fan. I'm sure I'll have great success again my first season as a season ticket holder. And we duly went and finished 20th and went into administration.
Yeah. So, but also that season as well, I set, because I could see the writing on the wall. I was involved with the trust weren't actually formed at the start of the season, but there was a lot of stuff going on with fans, supporters clubs, online message boards and stuff like that. We're all trying to galvanise and get together and start to dig into what was actually happening behind the scenes at Pompey. But anyway, on the pitch, I decided that I could see the writing on the wall for that season, and I wanted to go to every single game, home and away, league and cup. I was living in London at the time, so a good jump-off point to go to every game. Even went to Carlisle on a Tuesday night in September. I got the train from 3 o'clock from King's Cross. I was delayed just outside Crewe because someone was sitting on a bridge and threatening to jump. So I didn't actually arrive until half an hour into the game.
Oh, man.
And me and some friends had actually booked the night. Yeah, no, I got there, jumped in a cab when I got to the station, turned up half an hour into the game, 2,500 Pompey fans there, mostly from Clan Pompey, I should add, rather than the South Coast. But it was a good atmosphere. We won the game quite easily. And then me and some friends had booked the night train back to London, so we had to stay in the town till 1:30 until the train turned up from Glasgow and was going to take us to London. So it was an interesting evening. But unfortunately I was scuppered by Sky, as most things turn out. So they scheduled. So Liverpool was cancelled for some reason and was rescheduled as a TV game on a Monday night, and I just couldn't get out of work in time to get to Liverpool and back. So I got all the way to. Let's have a look at it. Well, that's yeah. Well, pretty much, yeah. I think I missed 2 in the end. Liverpool away and another away game, because obviously once my run had been broken, I couldn't be bothered. But obviously I went to all the cup games. Actually, no, that's right. Birmingham City. No, sorry. What was the one we won away? I can't remember. No, we beat Birmingham City 2-0, and I remember Utaka scored a good goal for that. And I went to the Southampton FA Cup game 4-1. So yeah, no, I think Liverpool and one other was the only ones I missed that season.
Yeah, we had like a Tuesday night third round game in Coventry. That can't have been very appealing.
That's the one I missed. So I watched that on television as well. That was a last minute equaliser or last minute winner by who was the guy from South Africa? Let's have a look. Mokoena scored a last minute, literally 120th minute winner in extra time. So, again, another interesting season to be involved in. Obviously, we ended up at Wembley at the end of that. So, you got your visit to two cup to Wembley twice, didn't you? To see the Spurs win and the Chelsea loss. So, wasn't too bad.
It really was a sort of a season of 2 parts, wasn't it? I think on in the league, completely abysmal. I can't remember too many plus points. I want to say we might have beaten Liverpool at home. That was a bit of a sort of highlight. But basically, the league season was a complete write-off. Finished 20th, bit of a disaster. But yeah, that FA Cup run, I think that kind of embodies the Pompey spirit for me. Because of course, like everything was going wrong. We had no money. The team were appalling. I think we started the league campaign with 7 losses on the bounce. I want to say that might have been like the worst Premier League start ever at the time. And as you say, the writing was on the wall in all sorts of ways. But
we ended up getting run to the station.
Yeah. The FA Cup run to suddenly sort of against all the odds, to go away to the Scummers and beat them. What a special day that was. That was one of the only times I think I've ever queued up in person for a game. Of course, as in for tickets. Of course, now it's you queue online, but living near the stadium at the time, I went down. I didn't trust my internet connection, so I actually went down and sort of joined the queue in round the back of the North Stands. It was at the time. That was really special, really special. I think although it's 4-1, I think that game was probably a lot closer than many of us really want to admit. Actually, that was it. It wasn't till quite late in the game that was really decided. But I mean, I can still remember now. I think it was it Aruna Dindan maybe. There was a goal that it looped up, and it's one of those ones. It just felt like it took sort of 10 seconds, seemingly, sort of in midair, and you're just waiting for it. The whole away end went silent, and then eventually, you know it's gone in, and everyone goes nuts. And then there's a couple of sort of lovely late goals to sort of put the gloss on it. It's Jamie O'Hara and Quincy Owusu-Abayi, I want to say.
That's it. Yeah. Well, I watched the highlights recently with my son. My son my son's 8, so he's getting into, not only is he into Pompey Current, he's into Pompey Pass. So we've been watching stuff like that. I've been watching stuff like that with him and telling him all about the games, and so I've seen those goals again quite recently.
It's
I think
good
you're right
to start
about
the
the game. I
indoctrination
think it was
process early, isn't it?
absolutely. Well, he's been in. The first time he went in the Fratton was when he was 2, so I did start him early, and he was in the boardroom when he was only about 8 or 9 weeks old. I took him into a PST meeting. Everyone had had a cuddle. But yeah, that we hit them on the counter attack at least twice, didn't we? So you're right. We were probably fortunate to get such a good result. It wasn't a 4-1 game.
But to kind of to overcome them, and then to go to Spurs of all the sort of history with, or not to Spurs, but, to beat Spurs at Wembley of all the history of Harry Redknapp, that felt like another sort of like a demon we sort of put to bed that day, and then to get all the way to the final. I don't know about you. That's probably the final against Chelsea is probably one of the few Pompey games I look back on and sort of have regrets about how we did. That's one of those ones that it wouldn't have taken much for that game to go differently, and that could have just been such a special moment. I don't know if I forget which book I read this in, but there was certainly a sort of a thing that there are. I got it right. I think our goalkeeper. No, would have been it. It would have been Kevin Prince Boateng was told by whichever coach it was at the time which way he was to take a penalty, and it didn't quite go to plan.
No, I think he scuffed it, didn't he? I don't think it was a clean connection. I think he. I don't remember him slipping, but I don't remember him getting a very good connection because it went straight at the goalkeeper. It was a poor penalty from him. But you're right. If we'd have scored that, there was only half an hour left. Who knows? We could have hung on like we did against Spurs. And
have you got any games like that you sort of look back on and think like what could have been?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but that was. The 2008 Cup final. I was no shame in saying I was pretty much drunk most of the weekend, and and I, my memories of it are patchier than they should be. But it was just this outpouring of euphoria that I never thought I'd get to a cup final supporting Pompey ever. And I was 40 that year. So I'd been supporting Pompey a long time to see them get to a Wembley semi-final, Wembley Cup final. But the second one, the Chelsea one, I was so serene and so calm, and we didn't have a chance. We didn't have a prayer. There was no way that we were going to win the game. We'd already had our cup final against Spurs and Harry Redknapp.
I felt like that at kickoff, but then by the sort of 50th, 60th minute, it's that awful thing, isn't it? You start believing and you start wishing and hoping.
Yeah. I was more reveling in the atmosphere. I was more reveling in the occasion. The first one, I was just literally bonkers. I feel like most Pompey fans, we just let everything go and had a great weekend, and we ended up winning it. The second time, I suddenly realised, I hadn't sung "Abide with Me." I hadn't really invested in the whole process. And the second one, I really wanted to drink in the whole occasion as a cup final. As with all the tradition and everything. So I think perhaps that's why I wasn't really that bothered that we lost, because we'd won it 2 years previously. I wasn't, it was a shame we lost. We probably didn't deserve to based on the balance of the game, but who knows? We wouldn't have been able to go into Europe anyway, so it wouldn't have mattered either.
I think I'm right in saying we were sort of technically entitled to as runners-up of the competition, and of course, we hadn't. Yes. Whether it's the paperwork or I forget the particular technicalities of it.
Veronica hadn't paid the fee or something. Right. Yeah. Barham Chamrai probably had a list as long as his arm for bills not to pay, and that was one of them. We didn't have a license basically to get into Europe. But who knew that we were going to get to a cup final anyway? So going on about favourite players and favourite games. What's there's obviously some standout ones there. Cup finals, notwithstanding. What other games might you put up there as some of your most favourite?
So I think in terms of favourite players, first of all, I certainly, Matty Taylor scored 2 goals in that first game I went to against Scunthorpe, and I think throughout the the Premier League years, he'd probably have been my favourite player growing up. I think the ones I associate more with, though, probably aren't so much the Premier League ones. Even though they sort of brought us great success, I think actually I'm more drawn to some of the ones that were sort of there in some of those later years. And even those like appalling seasons, like the League One relegation year.
Yeah.
that was even more miserable than that 2009-10 year. It was so bad. But I think, when you had any sort of like shining light in a season like that, those are the ones that I was really drawn to. I particularly remember Jed Wallace through those sorts of years. I don't know whether it's just by comparison, whether everyone else was so bad. We had so many journeymen on 1 month contracts and stuff at the time. But I just loved watching Jed Wallace play. I loved that he was he's obviously a sort of youngster coming through. He probably, among a few others, he's probably promoted ahead of sort of when he might otherwise have been in the team, just through necessity. But he took that chance and grabbed it with both arms, both legs. He was a real shining light in that team. I've got really fond memories of him where he'd sort of pick games up by the scruff of the neck. This was 21-year-old at the time, I think he was, and it was amazing to see the sort of energy and the enthusiasm and the drive. I remember there was one game, might have been Exeter. I think he sort of missed a penalty in this, let's say, the sort of 75th minute or something. And I've never seen a 15 minutes like individual performance like it after that. He was obviously so sort of driven on by missing this penalty at a time where the game was in the balance that he played out of his skin for the remaining 15 minutes of the game. He had that ability just to sort of run the game, to sort of drive forward and pick the team up by the scruff of the neck. I just loved seeing that. It was that sort of enthusiasm of youth. It's not a surprise to me at all that he's gone on to have a really successful championship career.
Yeah, no, he's been one of Millwall's best players for a long time. I don't know where he is now. Actually, I haven't caught up with him the last couple of years.
I don't think he's playing for Millwall. So have they got Scummers in the playoff semis? I think they do, don't they? So we could, a Jed Wallace goal against them in the semis would be a thing of beauty.
Let's have a quick Google and see where he is. Jed Wallace. He is. Yeah, you're right. He's a West Bromwich Albion. Mind you, I've not noticed him pop up as either goal. So I don't know how often he's playing for them, but you never know. He's a
pretty reliable sort of decent championship player. He scores a fair few every season.
Yeah, he does. No, like I say, he had a long good career with Millwall, and Millwall were always top 10. They flirted with the playoffs quite a few times over the last few years.
He had a tricky move to Wolves after us, and sort of never quite did it. Might even have been under Kenny Jackett, that actually, but as you say, so he moved to Millwall and hasn't really looked back since.
Yeah. A very good player, especially under the pressure of, as you say, about the time we were under. And you might 1 week he's playing with one 11, and the next week he's playing with a completely different 11 half the time. Every time I see Guy Whittingham, I always say to him, what you put up with for that year and a half was just bonkers. Really, he's a hero in my eyes, not just for his exploits of goal scoring in the 90s and 80s, but for the time that he put in for Portsmouth, probably for no money as well. An absolute hero.
One of my favourite little Pompey novelties is the Pompey calendar from that season, which obviously sort of is released in January every year, but probably went to print in about October. And of course, by the time it was actually sort of up on sort of young children's walls or being unwrapped at Christmas, there were already about 3 of the 12 players left, and I think by about March, they'd all left. It was I think that really typified the season that we were having and the sort of the sort of terrible plight of the football club at the time.
They could have brought out a sticker book instead, really, couldn't they? And with 100 stickers in it.
Yeah, and the rest, yeah,
probably, yeah. So, any other players that you liked around? Well, possibly a bit later or around the Jed Wallace period.
Yes, I'd say my next sort of favourite player from this sort of era, Christian Burgess. I think the partnership he and Matt Clark formed, they were irresistible. I used to love watching those two. Matt Clark was sensational. I still sort of look at his career and think, perhaps he's not quite fulfilled his potential. He was like a left-footed ball playing centre back like that is so sought after, and I'm slightly surprised he's not sort of really kicked on and sort of established himself in the Premier League, because I certainly, all through our League Two campaign, I really thought he was sort of destined for the very top. Him and Christian Burgess, used to love watching them. I think I'd still be we've got a great set of centre backs at the moment, but I'd still be very happy with those sort of going into a Championship season. Frankly, to have those in a League Two back four as it was at the time. We had Ender Stevens then as well. It was an unbelievable defence we had in that League Two season. I used to love Christian Burgess. I think he's an interesting footballer just because of his own sort of personal character. I once I think it might have been at a trust event. It was a sort of meet the players sort of thing. I've got a feeling you might even have let me in at the door, Scott, if I've remembered correctly. And there's a sort of meet the players event, and Christian Burgess was there. And I ended up chatting to him for about 20 minutes about the Labour leadership contest that was going on at the time. And you don't get that with many footballers. He was a genuinely interesting, articulate man that you could sort of have a proper conversation with beyond football. Really, really interesting guy.
We have, but the thing is, that's the weird thing, isn't it? We have had one or two centre backs who've actually got a bit about them. So Arjen de Zoo as well was a very well educated man, and has gone on to be a crime officer in Holland. I think he works for. I think he either works in the CSI team or works with them. So that as after careers go for footballers, that's pretty unheard of, isn't it? They mostly go into coaching or whatever these days. But I think he'd done some work in his teens on criminology and just followed it up afterwards. So, Pompey centre-backs, they're not all just bruisers. We do have a couple of educated ones in our history as well.
I think Christian Burgess was a great player in the community as well, wasn't he? I particularly remember during COVID, he was there sort of driving around doing deliveries and pitching in and helping out. And I just got the feeling he got it. And that might not be sort of what you sort of stereotypically think of someone who sort of gets Pompey. He was very well educated, very well spoken. He's possibly a bit more left wing than most of Pompey is, but he was. I genuinely think he got Pompey. He got the city. He bought into it, and he was someone that I think for all that Pompey gave him, I think he gave a lot back as well. And I just love that about Christian. I thought he was a terrific man, a great person to watch. And you mentioned there about sort of got a long line of interesting centre backs. I think I'd put him in there with Limvoy Primus and also more recently Sean Raggett as centre backs that people wrote off at various points, and actually they had to prove people wrong, and maybe sort of players were signed to replace them, and they got back in the team and they battled it out and they toughed it out. I think we've got a long line of centre backs that have had to do that, and I love that. Love that as a trait.
Well, Burgess got his rewards because he was playing in the Champions League this year. Played in the qualifiers. Sorry, the group stage for his Belgian side. I saw him a couple of times on telly. So he's playing at a very, very, very decent level, even quite late in his career. So well done to him.
I think every so often you see Pompey fans at his games that have gone out for basically a fantastic beer weekend in Belgium and tag on a game there to enjoy.
Yeah, absolutely. Perhaps we should export a few more Pompey players so we can have some decent weekends away in Europe. So we've sort of talked a little bit about Pompey's troubles. So obviously, in your current role as the PST chairman, when did you? Obviously, you've kind of hinted at the fact that you're politically motivated anyway, and possibly one of these people who do rather than just complain. So, when did you sort of decide to get involved in helping Pompey as well as supporting it?
So I mentioned that my first year as a season ticket was 2009-10, and with the greatest one in the world at that time, I wanted to watch football. I wanted to go and watch my team in the Premier League, and I wanted to enjoy it. And, before very long at all that season, football was not the main event at Pompey. And I think it's what made, mentioned the sort of link between maybe sort of football activism and politics. I think what motivates so many people in both those areas is anger, rightly or wrongly. People get angry about things and want things to change. I think, like so many Pompey fans in 09-10, I just couldn't believe what was happening to our football club. I couldn't believe that this was allowed to happen, and that people were sort of allowing this to happen to our football club. And I was 19 at the time, and drunk most days at university. So I probably wasn't best placed in 2009 to be sort of the one spearheading the charge. But I've got so much respect for the people that did and that saved our football club. And so I think from that sort of formative experience as a season ticket holder, I think I was very attuned to sort of like the ways that our football club had been let down. And inevitably that then sort of provokes you to think, well, I want to do something about this. So certainly when then the trust launched their share offer in 2012, I was still a student, and so I didn't have a lot of money at the time, but I'm very grateful they provided an option to buy one your £1,000 spread across the year. And so I did exactly that. I sort of took the option to pay the £1,000 over 12 months, and just about got by with my student loan and sort of little work on the side and all the rest of it, and bought my share that way. And I remain really proud of that. That was a big thing that we all did. And every time I sort of walk past my name on the North Stand, I do have a little smile about that, actually, that Pompey fans, we came together and we did it. We didn't just sit idly by. We organised, we mobilised, we as you said, we didn't just complain on the internet, we did it. We actually got off our seats, organised ourselves, and saved the football club.
Well, there was plenty of complaining on the internet, I can assure you.
Oh yeah.
but we had enough people who wanted to actually do something, which was great.
Well, look, it's not Pompey if there's not people complaining on the internet, is there? That was three constants in life: life, death, and complaining on the internet about Pompey. But so I bought my share in 2012, and then fairly shortly after that, I think I must have read about it in a matchday programme, maybe, but then Trust Chairman Ken Malley, I think not unreasonably, sort of recognised that the demographic of shareholders trended quite old, and he was quite keen to sort of get some younger people involved in the trust, and he set up a kind of like a youth forum, a sort of youth committee, and he's just sort of reached out for some younger people to sort of come in and have a bit of a chat and see what could be done. Met a few sort of great people doing that I think are still involved in the football club. I want to say, I think Ellis, who's designed all the 125th anniversary programme covers this year. I think he was part of that.
Absolutely.
There's a few other people sort of
Mike's still involved as well, bits and pieces, isn't he? So absolutely, you're talking about the next generations that I was involved in as well, weren't you?
Yeah, so absolutely.
It was successful. It brought people in to that arena where they probably wouldn't have had any other way in, or you'd have had to come through a supporters club, through the Tony Goodall Fans Conference, which is probably not the best way. We did have some younger people try and come in, but I think the format of that didn't really agree with what they were trying to bring to the club. So the next generations thing was something. It didn't last very long, but it brought in some talent like yourself and a couple of others. So it was a good thing. And Ken God rest his soul. That was one of the things that we all talked about. At a certain point, is that, like you say, the demographic was very, very high in age, and the trust would have had a finite lifetime if it relied on all of those people only. So I don't envy you having to sit in the chair that you do and trying to bring that demographic down a little bit, because it's that that is always going to be the trust problem. I think that you have to constantly renew the membership, and I'm sure you've got some great ideas. The trust have done some great work in the last 12 to 18 months with the work at the John Jenkins Stadium, and also the statue. That's what, for me, the trust has always been about. It's about helping the community. It's not always about the emergency service to come in and rescue the football club. Long term, it's about engaging fans as much as possible. And I think you're doing a great job with that at the moment.
Thank you. Yeah, I think funnily enough, I first stood for election for the full trust board in 2017, and it was that summer that the trust sold up. And actually, I could sense then that actually a lot of people kind of switched off from the trust. A lot of people were kind of going, well, the trust has done its purpose now. That's it. And I was I think when I sort of stood for election then, I was quite passionate then to actually say, well no, the trust doesn't need to stop here. That's not a kind of full stop on the Pompey Sports Trust. It still has a big role to play. I think, we're probably still now, getting on for a decade on, having to sort of demonstrate that and show that. But I think something I really truly believe. I think I'm so proud of the trust's history. I played a very small part in it, just being a shareholder, but I'm absolutely confident and convinced that the trust can be a sort of modern force for good. So I'm very grateful to the sort of trust board. I was made chair earlier this season, and I've really tried to sort of, I think, just sort of make it a bit more of a visible presence in kind of the Pompey life and Pompey community for people. So I obviously really thrilled with the Jimmy Dickinson statue. I think that was a fantastic project, and I'm really proud that the trust sort of took a lead on that and got it done. But other things like the street art mural, I think it's been a nice way just to sort of I don't know, to just sort of provide something that's going to sort of make people smile on match day.
People, doesn't it? Engages. Yeah. That's the thing. You need engagement and those things. Get people talking, not necessarily all about the trust, but the trust in relation to the football club, and that's the key thing, isn't it? You have to keep that enmity between the two, don't you?
Yeah, I think it's probably fair to say that the trust's main work, certainly since fan ownership, has always actually been being that voice for fans. We represent fans in genuinely sort of. I wouldn't be surprised if I've been involved in sort of 50 meetings this year with various members of staff at the club, whether it's about sort of tickets, merchandise, you name it. We've sort of engaged with the club on it, and it's just there sort of making sure that they're thinking about fans at all times, and that they've got sort of a fan opinion, and that they're sort of attuned to that, and making sure that fans are at the forefront of the decision-making process. And I think that really is the main work of the trust. But of course, that's not particularly visible. And so I think we just got to sort of go out there and make people aware of what we're doing, and make sure that people are involved and engage with us. Because of course, if we're representing fans in meetings, we've got to hear from fans, and we've got to listen to people and actually speak to fans and get a sense of what their priorities are and what they're interested in.
Yeah, I think you're right. Absolutely. And I think, as I said just a minute ago, I think you are doing that. The trust is far more visible in the last year than it has been for probably since we sold. And I think that's a credit to yourself and the other board members on, which are doing a great job. So, are you looking for new members? So, how do people become a member if they want to become a member? It's still £5 a year annually, isn't it?
£5 a year, which I, if I may say so myself, I think is a bargain. Like in the last year, all the projects that will have funded, as I say, the statue, the mural, all the other bits and pieces you've done. And, we gave £250,000 to the John Jenkins Stadium. £250,000. I'm really amazed that we've been able to do that. That was particularly some of the sort of money we had left over from when we sold the club, some of the sort of share money and all the rest of it that we had back. So, there's a real legacy aspect to that as well. So, I think, I would say we've given people good value for their £5 this year, I hope. If you want to join up, £5 supports all the projects that we've done, stuff like the TIFO on the final day of the season. If people would love to, if people would like to join up, we'd be delighted to have them. You can do that on our website. If people sort of are listening to this chat and think, actually, I fancy a bit of this, I want to get involved in this, I want to do more. Our election's open certainly this week. So, if you want to join us on the trust board and actually start doing things and start actually, organising projects and speaking to the club and engaging with the fan base, we'd be delighted to have engaged and interested Pompey fans on the board. So, I'm sure some people listening might be interested in that.
Cool. Thank you very much for that, Donald. So, that's pompeytrust.com, isn't it? If people want to find out more about the trust or I'm doing your work for you. So if people want to find more about the trust, pompeytrust.com. I'm sure you'll see Donald around Fratton Park, home and maybe some away games next season. So if you do see him, have a chat with him, because I'm sure he'll want to talk about the trust and any future good works. Thanks, Donald. It's been an excellent episode again. Thank you very much for joining me at My Pompey Life. So thank you very much, Donald Vass. And let's hope we do well in the Championship and Ipswich, perhaps.
Can't wait. Thanks for having me today. Cheers.
Cheers, mate. Thank you.